Hey y'all, my name is Kenny Kong. I'm the president and founder of PlantCon and the host of this very special podcast, People of PlantCon, a podcast that focuses on the humans that impact PlantCon and the humans that PlantCon impacts. I want to take you behind the scenes to meet all the people that make PlantCon possible, which includes the staff members that pour their hearts into this work and have sacrificed so much for it, the small businesses who depend on PlantCon for their livelihoods and risked so much to support us from the beginning, and the special guests who love what we're doing and constantly lend their voices and platforms to help us grow and reach more people. So with that being said, let's go back to the beginning.
It's just me and my plants. Sometimes I water them. Sometimes I walk around the yard and show my daughter them. It's just me and my plants. I'm in the gardening. They call me soft, but all these bars I still go hard in them. It's just me and my plants. Sometimes I water them. Sometimes I walk around the yard and show my daughter them. It's just me and my plants.
So for those of you who are new to PlantCon, welcome. I'm going to be using this episode to introduce you to our story, including how we started out as a small meetup in a parking lot of an IKEA. And since everybody is new to this podcast, I'll also share more about why the podcast came about and what I hope you'll get out of it. So before I get into PlantCon's story and a bit about my personal story, the first season you're going to be introduced to 4 directors and hear about their journeys through life and through this organization. They're all in their 20s and lead each of our 4 departments, which is administration, operations, logistics, and marketing. We didn't have any of these departments though, and it used to just be 3 of us doing all of it. PlantCon is less than 3 years old, so we've come a very long way very quickly. A bit about me personally, I am a first-generation American, grew up very poor, and have worked to support my mom as early as I was able to. She is a single mother and she did not speak any English at the time that my dad left the picture. I never dreamed of leading a company like PlantCon, and I did not think that it was possible for somebody from my background. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, but while I was attending community college, I took a freehand architectural drafting class. I did really well in it, and my professor encouraged me to apply to an architecture school and pursue it as a career. I grew up in Austin, Texas my entire life, but I applied and got accepted to the University of Houston's architecture school for a 5-year master's undergraduate combination program. I was doing super well. I literally ate, breathed, and slept architecture. I had a mattress under my desk in our studio, and I would spend literally days on end inside of the building without going home. It was such an intense program that they had showers inside of the building for us because they knew we wouldn't leave. And I had a mini fridge and microwave, and I would just meal prep so I could stay at my desk for days. About 4 years in architecture school, I was a professional architectural model builder, like the tiny scale miniature buildings that you see. I was hired on by a Spanish-French firm owned by the undergraduate dean of my college to build a model for an award-winning residential design that was used in multiple publications. And I also worked on the model for the redesign of the Jamaican Houses of Parliament. It's really cool. There are pictures of Prime Minister Andrew Holness with my models, and that was a very cool and unbelievable experience to get to do that. But the pandemic hit around the peak of when I was doing all of this, and I stopped having any work to do. I was also in my final year of school, which moved to being fully remote, and I hated it. So much of my architectural experience was based around being in the studio and like living and breathing studio. So going remote and having to bring school and that work into my own personal space was very difficult for me. At the same time that all of this was happening though, I had been gardening for a while, mostly vegetables for my 2 pet rabbits, and I started to really pay more attention to my garden as the pandemic was setting in, and eventually I started to get into houseplants too. I very quickly learned that there was a bigger community out there and started to create a Facebook group that got pretty big. If you were around for this era of the plant world, you remember the crazy plant purges that used to happen. And for those who don't know, there was a massive frenzy for plants. People would post an entire thread of plants that they had for sale in these groups. People would fight to claim them first and to buy them first. And this led to a lot of pickups for sellers and buyers, where sellers would have to dedicate several days to accommodating plant pickups. And so, you'd have people coming to pick up from you over the span of several days, and always kind of had to plan around that. And it was a lot to think about when you're selling like 50 to 80 cuttings of your plants and you have to sort them and make sure that they're ready for people when they're going to pick up. And buyers would have to spend hours driving around Houston to pick up their plants as well from all of these sellers. And if you know Houston, like one person's house in Houston can be 40 miles from the next person's house in Houston. And when you add traffic on top of that, that stretches this out for hours and hours and hours. Me personally getting really into the plant world, I was definitely in both camps, and I just wanted an easier solution for all of us. So I set a time, a date, and I picked a location for everybody to show up and just exchange purchases as a group, basically. The most central location ended up actually being the parking lot of an IKEA in Houston. So we all showed up. We popped our trunks open and we waited for people to grab their plants. And what I thought would be a pretty straightforward pickup actually ended up being a major social event for the community, since none of us had actually met in a group setting since the pandemic started. So these meetings started to really increase sales for the plant sellers because it made it so much easier to get plants, and it saved a lot of time and gas for buyers as well. As things started evolving and we kept hosting these, people started selling their plants out of the trunks of their cars, and I realized that we probably needed a new home for our unsanctioned IKEA pop-up. We had a member of the community offer their driveway, so we moved there. And then as more and more people in our community were getting laid off, we had a lot of members turn to other crafts as a mean to provide and sustain themselves. And this includes candle makers, soap makers, potters, beekeepers, you name it. And it became about so much more than just plants. It also became about the livelihoods and our greater community of people rather than just the plants. I took this as the next cue to evolve these meetups so that people weren't selling artisanal goods out of somebody's driveway. I started searching for a venue that could maybe take us in that had a more commercial nature, and I was very fortunate that Tenfold Coffee Company in Houston picked us up, and they allowed us to use their parking lot to start working towards a full-blown market. So I continued organizing and hosting these markets at Tenfold, and people still used it as a plant pickup, by the way, which was what the meetups were originally intended for. So it was very cool to see that we stayed true to that and kept it at the heart of the meetup. So it was not necessarily so much about the market, but a lot about meeting up and seeing each other and being able to wear a mask, be socially distanced, be outside, and actually get to know people instead of just talking to them through this Facebook group. So eventually the markets grew to have about 70 plus vendors each month, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. At its largest point, the city of Houston actually reached out to contract us to be the official plant market of the city of Houston, and they had us going beyond that to also organize holiday markets in the very middle of downtown, which was really, really cool. This entire time, there wasn't any kind of growth plan or any kind of trajectory in my mind. I was just rolling with what the community seemed to need. And as these needs grew, I did my best to meet them. I personally really thrive when I can do something for others to enjoy. I really like to think through all of the details and logistics to make something happen and make sure that it happens well. I love being the person that takes that opportunity up and knowing that to some degree, I can trust myself to do a good job with it and to meet this need responsibly. So the first time though that I really started to plan for growth was when I noticed that at a national level, there weren't any plant events in existence that were catering directly to our general plant hobbyist community, and especially any intergenerational events, because a lot of them have been around a long time. And so the events that did exist were either focused on a specific genus or they were catered towards their members and membership who tend to lean a little bit older and probably a little bit less diverse. And even if you went to these as a hobbyist, you were a little bit on the outs. So I wanted an event that felt like it was made for us. And you immediately know that before you even walk in the door that it is made by plant people for plant people. I went through a lot of names before I landed on PlantCon, and I picked this because I felt like it represented exactly what I wanted this to feel like and what I wanted to go for by making it basically an anime con, but for plants and plant people, for the die-hard plant fans. I had no idea how expensive something like this was, and most people don't. That's a bit of why I wanted to start this podcast too, so that I can share those details with others and give a little bit of insight and understanding on these things. When I started, I really looked for resources or guidance on how to start organizing a convention, but there was really nothing out there. And I'm hoping that by creating this, somebody has something to listen to or some kind of resource about event organization and can utilize that to anticipate a little bit more what goes into it and prepare themselves to have a better event. Because ultimately, I created PlantCon because I wanted a better event for plant people, and if we can do that for other communities or serve as a resource in any way, that just is a benefit that is beyond our personal mission. And I'm very excited that hopefully this podcast can do that. So when I made the decision to pursue PlantCon, there were only 3 of us on the team, and we had a lot of work cut out for us. I made the decision around December of 2022, and I wanted PlantCon to happen April of 2023, which was only about 5 months later. So it was a very short runway. And when you're starting out with something brand new, it's so hard to get traction in so many places. The main ones for us were getting a venue to respond to us and getting exhibitors to book booths at a show that has never happened before and at a higher price that they were used to paying for local markets and smaller events. Luckily, we had a really good relationship with everybody that vended at our plant markets. Most of them were willing to take the risk and support our dream of creating something bigger. We had only one venue get back to us in the end, which was Energy Center, and I was so thankful to have a place that was willing to take us on and work with us as brand new event organizers. They were so patient in explaining everything to us and making sure that we felt comfortable with what we were getting into. This ended up being the biggest risk that I've ever taken in my entire life, and that is something that I do want to communicate, is that doing something like this requires an insane amount of risk. To keep it a little bit short, the very first PlantCon cost about $60,000 after everything. And the terrible thing about the event industry, most events, is that 90% of your revenue is going to come from the days of the event itself. So you have to front everything before you even know how it's going to go. And I remember at this time in my life, I would wake up every morning with my heart racing, like every morning. Because every day I would look at my credit card and I would see a $30,000 balance at an insane interest rate looking back at me. And these were numbers that I had never witnessed in my life before. I've never made a $15,000 payment before until I had to put down a down payment for a venue. We can fast forward to the event here. We ended up having about 7 different news channels coming out and covering our very first PlantCon live, which really saved our lives in terms of ticket revenue. We saw a huge surge after the news stations came the first day, and we ended up with about 2,500 attendees at the end of it all. This allowed us to break even, which is the thing that everybody told me to focus on. I did have people that I was able to talk to about convention organizing, which I was very, very fortunate to have these people encouraging me and kind of helping to guide me through this. And that was the thing that they would all tell me to focus on, was just breaking even and not worrying about making money for the first event, as long as we can break even. As big of a deal as that was, and as much of an accomplishment as that was for a first-time show, it meant that there was no additional capital for us to roll into a next PlantCon. But it was clear from this one that PlantCon needed to become even bigger and even better than it was that year. To keep the next part short also, this doubled the cost of the next PlantCon for the next year. I continued to accrue ridiculous amounts of credit card debt and continued to wake up every day with my heart racing. I was opening 0% interest credit cards to try and balance all of our expenses and juggle all of our credit balances, and it was the most stressful thing, having to keep up with all those payment due dates, figuring out where to move money to give ourselves more time. Second PlantCon, which was also in Houston again, did end up being a huge success. We doubled our attendance and we increased ticket prices a little bit, as well as increasing booth space prices from our initial rates. We always, when we do a new event, heavily discount everything. And because this was the first ever PlantCon, we really heavily discounted everything so that people would give PlantCon a shot, and we hoped that the value would come through for them, and it clearly did. So we came out of the show with profit for the first time. I decided to roll that into adding a new city, which was Dallas. We made the decision in May of 2024, and the date was set for September 2024, which only gave us about 4 to 5 months. And if there's one thing that we've learned, it's that you can make some very crazy stuff happen in a very short amount of time. We were working 80-hour weeks at this time, though. I was not getting paid, and the few people on our team who were getting paid still had to work other full-time jobs or find ways to bring in additional income on the side just so that they could work on PlantCon. Another very, very long story short, PlantCon Dallas was another really huge success, and it even outdid that year's previous Houston. We had enough money to bring on a few more team members and put down some deposits for the next year's venues, but even with this, the highest paid person on our team was making about $750 a month at this point. That's like $9,000 a year before tax. You don't do this and you don't get into this for the money. For us, it was definitely about meeting a need in our community and wanting to see our community thrive with the hope that we can build something bigger. And yes, eventually it can be something that we can do full time that pays us back for the risk, the investment, and the sacrifices that we made in order to make it possible in the first place. It's really hard to believe that this was only a year ago because it feels like forever ago and a lot has happened, but it has literally only been a year since that last Dallas ended. After that Dallas ended, we decided we'd hit Orlando in February of 2025, which again was only a 4 to 5 month turnaround. It was a really incredible show in a lot of ways. All of our exhibitors were really thrilled with it. Attendees loved it. The sponsors really enjoyed it. The presentations were great, but the attendance just was not there. We only had about 2,300 attendees, which was a huge fall from the 5,000 that we were hovering around for the past 2 shows. Luckily, Houston was the next show after that, our 3rd Houston ever, and we nearly doubled our attendance from last year's Houston show. This really saved us financially, but we still lost about $90,000 on Orlando, and so it was still a very huge hit to our growth. After this point, you're probably going to start hearing us talk a lot on the show about what comes next, since it was literally only 4 months ago from today, but I wanted to give more context on some of the older shows and the history that we don't get into right away. Next up, after that, we did New York City, which we basically broke even on, but it was really incredible. As a side note, we pay for all of the travel fees for our team members, which includes flight and hotel. And this was the first time in New York City for so many of our team members. And it was very surreal to know that the reason why people were able to experience NYC for the first time in their lives was because of PlantCon. And PlantCon Dallas just happened in October. Today, as we record this, it's November 18th. So it's literally a month ago from today that Dallas happened. Very, very recent. All of our episodes for season 1 are actually going to be recorded on site in Dallas, which pretty much means that you are caught up at this point. Thank you guys for sticking around to hear our story, and I hope that this sets a beautiful stage for our upcoming episodes. Our team now has about 40 plus members, and we have an internship program with about 15 to 20 more people. They are all truly wonderful people who love and care about this and pour so much of their hearts into making sure that PlantCon is an event that serves our community well and brings everybody together. So I'm very excited for you to get to know them through this podcast. And that's all for now, really. Again, I'm Kenny Kong, and I look forward to being your host for this season. We'll see you in the next episode where I chat with Gladys Segura, who is our executive director and was one of the original 3 on the team when we first launched PlantCon. So we'll see you guys next time. Bye. PlantCon Talks is created and hosted by me, Kenny Kong. Our showrunner is Ava McCain, with sound engineering by Trent Gear, and to the incredible PlantCon staff, as well as the attendees, ambassadors, vendors, and volunteers that make PlantCon possible. Huge thanks to Rocco Elliott for the use of his music. Stay up to date with all things PlantCon at plantcon.org or by following us on social media at plantcon.intl. Have you seen the Kamala Harris one where it's like me whenever somebody asks what my name is, but ChatGPT is down. And she goes, Muhammad Ali.
For real.
That's me.